Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Rules Bites here on Myth Brigade. My name's Jason, and today we're going to continue talking about Warhammer Fantasy 4th Edition's combat system. One of my favorite aspects of this system is the damage. It tends to be a little bit brutal, but the level of realism is something that you don't find in a lot of role-playing games. Broken bones, torn muscles, and severed limbs await anyone unlucky enough not to get the upper hand in combat. And even if you survive, there's always disease and infection to contend with afterwards. It's pretty brutal. It's pretty cool. Let's dive in. A character's wounds are synonymous with hit points in other game systems. So when you take a point of damage, you lose a wound. This represents cuts, scrapes, abrasions, bruises, and even mental and spiritual damage. For serious damage, 4th edition provides critical wounds. This type of damage is more like torn flesh and broken bones and ruptured organs and other major but super fun injuries. In most cases, especially combat, your character's toughness bonus reduces the amount of damage taken from each attack. So if a character with a toughness of 36 is struck in the head with a mace for 5 wounds, the damage is reduced by 3 because of the toughness bonus. So he only winds up losing 2 wounds. Likewise, armor worn in the specified hit location also reduces damage taken. So in our previous example, if the character were wearing a helmet, which affords 2 armor points, it would have reduced the damage by another 2 wounds, and he would have been just fine. If you lose all of your wounds, then you succumb to your injuries and gain a prone condition. This starts a round by round timer equal to your toughness bonus. If you don't heal at least 1 wound within that number of rounds, then you pass out and wind up gaining the unconscious condition. Unlike some other systems, 0 is the lowest your wounds can go in Warhammer 4th Edition. If you take enough damage to reduce your wounds into the negative, then you take a critical wound. This means that you suffer all of the effects of reaching 0 wounds, but you must also rule on the critical wounds table for the location hit. Note that if you suffer more negative wounds than your toughness bonus, so -4 or fewer if your bonus is 4, then you actually get a -20 bonus when rolling on the critical wounds table. Believe me, this can be really important because the higher numbered results are usually pretty catastrophic. Now, handling critical wounds is a little weird. When a critical wound is scored, the rules call for a separate roll to determine the hit location and a separate roll to determine the actual critical result. The critical wound table then provides the amount of damage taken, which always ignores both toughness and armor bonuses. It usually also is accompanied by some pretty grisly narrative to help you understand exactly what the injury was like. This is usually accompanied by some penalties and conditions that come along with the injury as well. To be honest, I think that the critical wound system could be a little bit more streamlined. I don't like the extra dice. There's probably some math somewhere that suggests that that's the proper way to go, so I'll leave it alone for now. Maybe in 5th edition, we'll combine some of those rolls. In the 4th edition rules, there are essentially a few ways to meet your end. First, if you receive an unconscious condition and have 0 wounds, you compare the critical wounds that you've suffered to that point with your toughness bonus. If you have more critical wounds than your toughness bonus, then you're going to die at the end of the round, unless you heal some of those critical wounds. If you are unconscious, note that anyone attacking you can pretty much kill you if that's their intent. Finally, the most extreme results on the critical wounds table generally carry a bit of a death penalty, a juicy, drippy, sprayy death penalty. Remember, this is the very reason you've got fate points, so save them up and use them wisely. In the Tides of Nurgle campaign, we're actually using an optional rule called sudden death. The idea here is that mob level bad guys die when they reach 0 wounds, so no critical wounds. I think this will keep things moving more quickly and reduce some record keeping on the GM. Note that key NPCs and villains should always follow the standard course of combat. Certain critical wounds result in broken bones or torn muscles, and the 4th edition combat rules actually break up these injuries into 2 levels of severity, major and minor, each carrying a unique set of penalties, hindrances, and requirements for healing. Healing is obviously a lot more difficult in the case of a major tear or break, in some cases taking as much as 10 days more to heal. Anytime you suffer a critical wound marked with a notation of amputation, not only do you lose the limb immediately, but you need to make an endurance check at the difficulty listed. The idea here is that if you succeed, you kind of hold your balance, but if you fail, you gain the prone condition. A failure level on this check of -2 or worse results in the character receiving the stun condition, and if the failure is a -4 or worse, it will actually leave the character unconscious. All amputations require surgery to heal properly, so the character would have to visit a surgeon before the critical wounds could be removed. Page 180 of the core rulebook describes amputations in a little more detail and gives you the specific penalties and effects of losing a limb or an eye or a teeth or toes. It would really suck to have your teeth chopped out with a sword. Ugh. There are quite a few conditions that can affect a character during gameplay, but I wanted to cover a few that I thought were pretty important to combat, so let's do that. First up is bleeding. When you receive a bleeding condition, you're considered to be losing blood at a fairly rapid rate, so you're going to take 1 wound per round while that condition persists. You're also going to suffer a -10 penalty to resist situations like festering wounds, blood rot, and minor infection. So, you want to put a band-aid on that. If you reach 0 wounds, you stop the round-by-round loss, but you immediately fall unconscious. Also, there's a 10% likelihood per bleeding condition that your character could die at the end of each round. Unconsciousness persists until all bleeding conditions have been removed. And when the bleeding finally stops, your character receives the fatigued condition. So, don't bleed. Ugh. Whether it be due to a loss of wounds or other factors, the prone condition essentially means that you've been beaten and battered to the ground. On your next turn, your move must be used to stand or to crawl at half your movement. While prone, you suffer a -20 penalty to any action that involves movement. Also, all of your enemies receive a +20 bonus to hit you. You're going to want to stand up. If your character is unconscious, you can't move, you can't act, you can't do anything. You're unaware of your surroundings, what's going on, what's being said. You are, in fact, unconscious. What's worse is anyone who wants to attack you will be able to successfully hit. Melee attacks will be an automatic critical success, and the attacker gets to choose the hit location for the blow. Ranged attacks hit automatically as well and are treated as point blank for damage purposes. Note that the unconscious condition does not stack, and it's a little tricky to remove. We've talked about all the ways that your character could get mangled. Let's talk about healing for a second. Normal wounds can actually be healed without the need for medical attention. Wounded characters can attempt an average endurance test after a good night's sleep. The success level of this test plus your toughness bonus represent the actual wounds healed. If you spend an entire day at rest, an additional number of wounds up to your toughness bonus can be healed as well. Critical wounds must be healed by removing all conditions along with any temporary penalties caused by the wound. This is fastest through the use of healing spells and prayers or through the use of the heal skill at the hands of a trained professional. Finally, some wounds require surgery in order to be totally healed. In such cases, all of the penalties and conditions associated with the wound actually persist until surgery occurs. There are a couple other types of damage covered on page 181 of the core rulebook. Things like drowning, suffocation, exposure, and all those fun things. I won't cover them here, but if you're a GM running the game, it may be a good idea just to give it a quick skim and familiarize yourself with the rules. There we go. We have now covered Warhammer Fantasy Role-Play 4th Edition's combat system in enough detail to have you cleaving the heads off of your opponents in no time. You'll also remember how to spend fate points to keep yourself alive when your opponent cleaves your head off as well. I mean, not the same opponent, that'd be weird. Next time, we're going to jump into the concept of corruption, where you will learn how the dark gods can use their sinister powers to basically rip your soul right out of your bum. Spoiler alert, if you're willing to take on the corruption, you can actually tap into their ruinous powers to your benefit during the game. If you're enjoying this series or any of our other videos, do us a huge favor. Click the thumbs up and leave us a few words in the comments. Subscribe and turn on the alerts for more campaign stream sessions, rules bites, product reviews, and everything tabletop RPG. Your feedback is really helpful in our efforts to grow the channel, and your likes and subscriptions are helping to get Myth Brigade into the infamous YouTube algorithm. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time, and in the meanwhile, no bleeding, no amputations, and no critical wounds. Roll the scary thing.